This season we got our 7th and final Salmon Run stage for Splatoon 3. It got me thinking about all the other maps in the game. How good are they, and is 7 maps really enough? So in today's video, I'm gonna rank all the Salmon Run stages. I will put them into this tier list and I'll explain my placement for every one of them. Going in the order in which the maps were released, let's start off with the ones from launch. Starting with Sockeye Station. Sockeye is the map we see in the Salmon Run trailer and it's used as the tutorial for a reason. This is the simplest stage here. Its layout is very open and easy to navigate. It has some areas that were implemented in a really smart way to make it more beginner friendly. For example, this tower that overlooks the whole map. It can be used by long-ranged weapons, to get high ground, or even to momentarily keep yourself safe during tougher waves. Another example is these ledges on low tide. They let you take the time you need to safely take care of shore bosses without getting distracted or killed by any other salmonids. Stuff like this makes it obvious to me that the map was designed with less experienced players in mind, and I think that's a great thing. But the layout has nothing that makes it stand out and that can make it feel repetitive. Something that's really cool though is that pretty much every comp works on Sockeye, even if it's horrible. Overall, Sockeye Station is a solid map. Its only real flaws are that it's not very unique, and sometimes it feels a bit too easy. But that's because it was clearly meant to be very accessible and beginner-friendly, which I think is a good thing. To me, this makes Sockeye Station an A rank. Moving on, we have another map that was available from launch, Fission Hydroplant. This one is much different in the sense that it's more closed in and geometric. I personally really like these walls that surround the basket. They make Hydroplant feel unique because you spend a majority of games on high ground, which is an advantageous position. But what's interesting is that they also add some difficulty. They make it harder to get back if you go to the shore, and the paths to the basket can become very dangerous if there are salmonids in the way. Fission Hydroplant also harshly punishes teams who can't keep things under control. Since most bosses get basically funneled to the basket, that area will become completely inaccessible if your team is overwhelmed. These factors make Hydroplant have a satisfying difficulty balance. And that's still true with the harder night waves. Glowflies and grillers are still hard, but they're not an insta-loss and can be won consistently even in freelance. One thing I don't like as much though is low tide. I like the idea of one big path that all the salmonids have to go through, but it often ends up being a struggle in practice. That path is always completely overrun by salmonids with a ton of unobtainable eggs. Other than that though, I really like Fission Hydroplant. The difficulty is well balanced and it has a cool layout that keeps it fun even 2 years later. Fission Hydroplant goes into the S tier. Alright, fun's over guys. We have to talk about the Splatoon 2 ports. Seriously though, let's move on to spawning grounds. Ground's biggest issue is the graded area. These grates force you to walk and regain ink super slowly, and that makes it easy for you to get caught by salmonids. And if you do, you can't heal. Yes, you can avoid grates on normal tide by simply going into the death pit, but on high tide, literally half the map is unusable. Grounds is also quite tough in general, because shore bosses are really hard to reach when they're on the docks. Mid and the basket area are quite small, so it's very hard to come back once you get overwhelmed. But spawning grounds does have some positives. For example, I like night waves. The little platform next to the basket makes them easier to handle and to reach quota. I also like the layout in general if you just pretend the grates don't exist. It's hard, but it can also be pretty fun with a team who knows how to play it. But it's true that grounds is still comp reliant, meaning that it requires good weapons or you will struggle a lot. Spawning grounds is overall a pretty mediocre map. It can be fun with a good team, but it was clearly not made for the way Salmon Run works in Splatoon 3. It's way too comp reliant and those grates really need to go. For me, spawning grounds belongs in B tier. Now that we're done covering the release maps, let's move on to the ones that came with seasonal updates. Our first one is another Splatoon 2 port, Marooner's Bay. This is probably the most infamous Salmon Run map, and for good reason. I have to say that I do like the concept. I think that having a map set on a sunken ship is really cool, and the propellers are interesting as well. However, Bay feels awful to play on. The ship is very narrow, so paths are constantly blocked by salmonids with eggs just stuck there. But if you choose to kill them on the shore, then it's also really hard to bring back eggs, and you'll probably get stuck and killed anyway. Shore bosses are incredibly hard to reach as well. If you get more than 2 of them, then it's pretty much game over. And of course, night waves also suffer from this stage's various flaws, so they're very hard to survive. Frankly, with Marooner's Bay, you have to look for anything positive to say. And even then, nothing can make up for the amount of massive flaws it has. As if it wasn't already bad, it's also very comp-reliant and needs a god-tier comp for it to be even considered playable. In my notes for this video, I wrote "fuck this map," and yeah, that pretty much sums up my feelings about it. See it here. Next up, we have an original map, Jammin Salmon Junction. Junction has a layout that plays a lot with height and ramps. It can be very narrow, but I think it's done really well here. The height lets you take advantageous positions, and the terrain overall makes the map feel really fun and dynamic. I think the difficulty with this stage mostly comes from an awareness and fundamentals check. Junction can make you very quickly reach that point of no return. It requires you to recognize when you're in a bad situation where the team is going to be overwhelmed soon. It's also really important to know and understand how to prioritize bosses because some are extremely threatening here. For example, Steel Eel is super dangerous on Junction because it often takes up entire paths or blocks off the basket. To me, Jammin Salmon Junction is near perfect. I definitely understand those who might not like it, but I really love maps that are good and challenging. Every game feels super dynamic and fun, and it's all thanks to Junction's unique layout. Easy S tier. Then we have Salmonid Smokeyard from Drizzle Season 2023. This is our final Splatoon 2 port, and my first question when it was announced was, will it beat the Splatoon 2 curse? And well, kinda. The layout is pretty good. I actually really like these moving platforms in the middle. I think they add depth and give an identity to Smokeyard. I also like how mid is all high ground. It gives good angles to kill certain salmonids like flyfish. And shore bosses in general are not too hard to deal with here. Unfortunately though, this map can get pretty tough in freelance. It's fairly small, which means it's quite easy to get overwhelmed, even if you use all your specials. Smokeyard also requires a bit of luring if you want to reach quota, because it can be really hard to bring back eggs from the shore. Overall, Salmonid Smokeyard feels good enough for me. It's a fun map, but it can sometimes be a struggle depending on who you're playing with. I know people have very mixed opinions about this one, but for me it belongs in A rank. Let's move on to our 7th and final Salmon Run stage, Bonerattle Arena. Bonerattle's main gimmick is ink rails. They're all over the map and can be used as shortcuts or for cool jumps. They also let you heal, refill your ink, and keep yourself safe from salmonids. Ink rails are a fantastic gimmick. They're versatile, feel great to use, and they make the stage feel unique. I also really like Low Tide. It has a more circular shape than usual, and the basket area is separated from where the bosses spawn. And there's also a ton of ink rails to quickly let you jump from one section to the other, which is super helpful when you want to kill shore bosses or bring back eggs. The terrain overall feels really good to play on. Shore bosses are easier to deal with than usual, and I really like the verticality of this stage. However, Bonerattle does have one flaw, and it's the night waves. The night waves are just not great. The ink rails do help to stay alive, but it's a struggle to bring back eggs to the basket and reach quota. Even the easier night waves can feel a bit awkward. Despite the issue with night waves, Bonerattle Arena is still an amazing stage to me. It's not hard, but it doesn't feel too easy either. And the ink rail gimmick makes every wave really enjoyable. This one goes into X tier. This is my completed tier list for every Salmon Run stage. I try to be as fair as possible, but of course I still have my own opinions. It's true that 7 maps doesn't seem like many, but most of them are solid and feel really good to play on. Overall, I'm satisfied with this final map list, even if I would have liked a few more, and maybe a rework for the ones that aren't exactly adapted to Splatoon 3's iteration of Salmon Run. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you so much for watching, let me know in the comments if you agree with my tier list or not, don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye!